The beloved character, portrayed by Joshua Richards, endured months of enslavement on Ray, Joe Absalom, and Celia Daniels, J. Griffith's farm, where he was compelled to exist and labor in appalling conditions, that he suffered multiple types of mistreatment, and even witnessed another victim perish in his embrace. Bear ultimately fled the farmhouse, hunted down Ray, and strangled him to death. His son Paddy Dingle, Dominic Brunt, and Dylan Penders, Fred Kettle, witnessed the killing and assisted in loading Ray's body into the rear of Jai Sharma's, Chris Bisson vehicle. They subsequently chose to conceal Bear from the outside world in an attempt to keep the sinister secret buried. He eventually revealed everything to a counselor and has been released on bail by officers, but remains haunted by his actions. Following a discussion with Ray's ex-partner Laurel Thomas, Charlotte Bellamy, Bear went home and shattered a mirror, slashing his hand in the process. Did I end Friday's installment? Bear turned up at the hospital demanding urgent treatment. The nurse confirmed he would receive attention at the earliest opportunity, but would need to wait his turn. His patients wore increasingly thin, and trainee medic Jacob Gallagher, Joe Warrenplant, ushered him into a private room to attempt to provide some initial treatment to his injured hand. Bear began to panic and grabbed Jacob from behind in what amounted to a wrestling tackle. Jacob crashed to the ground in pain, as a hospital security guard escorted Bear into a nearby room. Paddy and his wife Mandy Dingle, Lisa Riley, arrived at the hospital to learn that a psychiatric team had been summoned. Whilst debating what would be best for their father, they discovered he had vanished. Outside on a darkened road, Bear strode alongside the flow of traffic. Where is he headed, and will he come to any harm? Next week's spoilers have revealed that Paddy is devastated after spending the night searching for Bear without success. Matters soon take a further turn for the worse for Paddy and Dylan when D.S. Walsh, Amanda Ryan, pays them a visit following Bear's bail breach and his assault on Jacob at the hospital. He faces being remanded in custody once he is located. A worried Paddy eventually tracks down Bear in a distressed state beside the now empty grave of Anya Barisha, Olia al-Shabibi, and gently persuades his father back to his car. Paddy recognizes he must notify D.S. Walsh, yet believes he can prevent Bear's immediate imprisonment by funding a placement at a secure mental health facility. But will his plan succeed? Bear had always been a towering presence, a former wrestler with a booming laugh and a heart that beat fiercely for his family. But at Ray and Celia's farm, he became silent. Smaller, shrinking inside himself. He was forced to work from dawn until long after dusk, hands blistered and bleeding, muscles screaming beneath the weight of endless labor. Meals were scraps. Sleep was shallow and restless. Every attempt to speak up was met with cruelty. And then there was the moment that would never leave him. Another victim, gaunt, terrified, barely clinging to life, collapsed into Bear's arms one bitterly cold evening. Bear held him as the man's breathing slowed and stopped. No ambulance was called. No police. Just silence. That was the moment something inside Bear cracked. The killing of Ray. When Bear finally escaped, he didn't run to the police. He hunted. Ray had always believed fear was a leash. He thought Bear was broken beyond repair. He was wrong. The confrontation was brutal and fast. Words were exchanged, venomous, explosive. Ray laughed at first. Then Bear's hands found Ray's throat. And he did not let go. The rage was years in the making, fueled by humiliation, grief, and the image of a dying man in his arms. By the time it was over, Ray lay still on the cold earth. Witnesses in the dark. Bear hadn't been alone for long. His son, Paddy Dingle, portrayed by Dominic Brunt, arrived, panic flooding his features as he took in the scene. With him was Dylan Penders, played by Fred Kettle. They saw everything. The body, Bear's trembling hands, the haunted look in his eyes. There are moments in life when morality blurs. Paddy knew his father had suffered unspeakably. He also knew a man was dead. Sirens hadn't yet pierced the air. They had seconds to decide. Together, they lifted Ray's body and placed it in the back of a vehicle belonging to Jai Sharma, portrayed by Chris Bisson. The weight of what they were doing settled like a stone in their chests. But family came first. Or so they told themselves. The secret that wouldn't stay buried. For a time, the truth stayed hidden. Bear was concealed from the outside world, shielded by those who loved him most. The official story shifted and twisted, avoiding direct scrutiny. But secrets have a way of surfacing. Bear's nightmares intensified. He woke drenched in sweat, hearing Ray's final gasps echo in his ears. He avoided mirrors, unable to face the man staring back at him. Eventually, the burden became too heavy. He confessed everything to a counselor, The authorities were alerted. Officers questioned him. And though he was released on bail, he was not free. Not really. The Shattered Mirror. After a tense conversation with Ray's ex-partner Laurel Thomas, played by Charlotte Bellamy, Bear returned home feeling hollow. Laurel's words weren't accusatory. They were worse. They were sad. "You took someone from this world," she had said quietly. "And now we all have to live with that." Back in his house, Bear stared into a mirror. He saw a killer. With a roar of anguish, he punched the glass. It exploded. Shards rained down, slicing into his hand. Blood trickled across the floor. But the pain in his palm was nothing compared to the storm in his mind. Chaos at the hospital. By Friday's episode of Emmerdale, Bear appeared at the hospital demanding urgent treatment. His hand was wrapped in makeshift cloth, soaked through with crimson. The nurse informed him calmly that he would be seen, but he had to wait. Wait. The word triggered something primal. His breathing grew ragged. The walls felt closer. The fluorescent lights too bright. Jacob Gallagher, portrayed by Joe Warren Plant, noticed the distress. Still a trainee medic, eager to help, Jacob ushered Bear into a private room to assess the wound. "Let's just take a look," Jacob said gently. But as he reached for Bear's hand, Bear flinched. Suddenly, the sterile room wasn't a hospital. It was the farmhouse. The panic hit like a tidal wave. In a split second, Bear grabbed Jacob from behind in what resembled a wrestling tackle. Years of muscle memory kicked in. Jacob crashed to the ground with a cry of pain. Security rushed in, restraining Bear and escorting him into a nearby room. Outside, chaos erupted. Paddy's worst fear. When Paddy and his wife Mandy Dingle, portrayed by Lisa Riley, arrived at the hospital, dread filled the air. A psychiatric team had been summoned. "He didn't mean to hurt anyone," Paddy insisted. But the damage was done. And then, as if things couldn't spiral further, Bear vanished. A figure in the dark. Outside, under the cover of night, Bear walked alongside a busy road. Cars rushed past, headlights streaking across his face. He walked without direction, without destination. Just movement. Where was he going? Even he didn't know. The search. Next week's spoilers reveal Paddy spent the entire night searching. Calling. Driving. Praying. Each unanswered ring of Bear's phone tightened the knot in his stomach. Dylan stood by him, guilt etched into his features. They had covered up a killing. They had believed they were protecting Bear. But had they only delayed the inevitable? The law closes in. The knock on the door came sooner than expected. D.S. Walsh, portrayed by Amanda Ryan, stood on the doorstep. Her expression was firm. Bear had breached bail. He had assaulted Jacob at the hospital. If located, he would likely be remanded in custody. Paddy's heart sank. Prison would destroy his father. At the grave of Anya Barisha. It was near dawn when Paddy finally found him. Bear was sitting beside the now empty grave of Anya Barisha, portrayed by Olia Al-Shabibi. The earth was freshly disturbed. Bear's shoulders shook silently. "She didn't deserve what happened," Bear whispered. "None of them did." Paddy approached slowly. "You need help, Dad. Real help." Bear didn't resist as Paddy guided him toward the car. For the first time in weeks, he looked tired rather than furious. Broken rather than dangerous. A desperate plan. Paddy knew he had to inform D.S. Walsh. But he also knew prison would only worsen Bear's fragile mental state. There was another option. A secure mental health facility. It would require money, a lot of it. But Paddy was willing to do whatever it took. He would fund the placement himself, if necessary. He would beg, borrow, sell assets. Anything. Because this wasn't just about avoiding jail. It was about saving his father's mind. What comes next? As the week unfolds, the question looms. Will the authorities accept Paddy's proposal? Or will Bear be taken into custody regardless of his deteriorating mental state? The Dales have seen heartbreak before. But this story cuts deep, exploring trauma, vengeance, guilt, and the long shadow of violence. Bear is no villain. He is a man who broke under unimaginable strain. But actions have consequences. And now, standing at the edge of freedom and confinement, his future hangs in the balance. One thing is certain. The road ahead will not be easy. And the Dingle family may never be the same again.